Have you ever wondered what makes an artist with a capital A? Aisha reassures us that the only prerequisite is being alive. Let Aisha's work draw you closer to the magical creative force of the artist inside you, the pure creative energy that infuses all of life together. Also, if you find this work particularly delightful, be sure to register for her design workshop, a full semester course in the fall, maybe or maybe not in the spring 2024. And so please, with no further ado, let's welcome our speaker, Aisha Densmore-Bey.
Hi. Yeah, let me make sure. Can everyone hear me? Yeah. You good? Okay. Well, number one, thank you so much for coming. Just thank you. I really appreciate everybody being here. You have your choice of wonderful things to do on a Wednesday night. And so I'm really appreciative that you want to sit here with me, at least for a little while. So thank you very much. Let me make sure I can advance these slides. Technical difficulties, but you know what? If we have any other technical difficulties tonight, we're going to work through them, because what else can we do? So let's see. There we go. Okay, arrow. Thank you. Okay, so about 20 minutes ago, 10, 15 minutes ago, actually, once we finally got the, the music working, you all were listening to one of my favorite artists, John Coltrane. And he is, like I said, one of my favorite musicians, favorite artists of all time. And a lot of his work, especially during the latter half of his career, was really about love and spirituality and all of that. And so I would love to bring that into the room, okay? And so, what I'd like you guys to do is just humor me for a minute. So everybody close their eyes, and that means nobody's exempt. So close your eyes, hand over your heart. Okay, breathe in, breathe out. Okay, just think about love. Just think about bringing love into the room, sending love to everyone who is here, everyone who made it here tonight. Making them safe on their way home. Just think about love, bringing love and understanding and kindness into the room, okay? A little bit more. All right, perfect. Thank you very much for indulging me. So you've seen this phrase, one positive thought produces millions of positive vibrations. So when Karen asked me to do this talk, so kindly asked me to do this talk, I'll say, one of the things she said is that people like to hear about your background and hear, your path in architecture and everything else. And I was going, nobody wants to hear that. No one wants to see behind the curtain of Aisha and see all this other stuff. But, I kind of realized that, really thinking about it, that part of my path, or most of my path, and how I move through design and architecture right now, like my creative practice is really rooted in a reflection of how I was raised and all of those foundational experiences. And so I think it's something that we need to talk about. So you're going to get a lot of Aisha in the first few slides. And so I hope that's okay. And then I will show how that, how my foundations, those earlier years kind of feeds into my work, and then how my work feeds into the research that I'm doing now. So if you haven't heard of me before, and that's quite possible, my creative practice has a foundation in architecture. Architect will always be an architect, but I do a lot of graphic design, a lot of design strategy. Teaching has become a lot of my, like a pillar of my practice. I never thought it would be, but in the past few years, it definitely has. Definitely a foundation in art, writing, children's books, plays, all of that, and then filmmaking. And I'm going to try and rush through these slides because I got way too many slides to fit into a 50-minute presentation. So I'm gonna have to hurry. But like I said, art is very, it takes primary source in my life. And I love these two photos because, like I said, I'm always in museums and galleries and things like that. And to the left, that is a drawing from Saul LeWitt. And I love Saul LeWitt's work. It's just incredibly graphic and beautiful and looks simplistic, but it's not. And he's also from Hartford, Connecticut, where I'm from. So Hartford, stand up. And then the photo on the right, it's just like, when you see yourself in your mind's eye, that's how I see myself. That's how I feel like I am kind of every day. And plus, I trekked 2 hours through the Louvre to find that doggone painting. So I'm going to show it as often as possible. And I like to title this, that image, Woman in Black with Portrait of a Black Woman. And the painting is by Marie Guilherme Benoit. Just had to show those because I like those photos. I really like photos of myself. But that, that love of art stems from my childhood. My mother kept me in art museums and galleries and lectures and dance classes and sculpture, like all this stuff. That was just a regular thread throughout my entire childhood into my teenage years. And so, that was very much, and it left an indelible mark on who I am. And then also what was very, kind of left an impression on me was this very handsome gentleman to the right. That's my Uncle Roger with his wife, my Aunt Zira. And I never met my Uncle Roger. He passed away when he was 29, but he studied architecture and engineering. So he practiced architecture and engineering. He was also a developer. He was also a pilot. He rode horses. He was into sports. He was like all of that kind of stuff. And so even before I knew that I wanted to be an architect, this was the first architect that I knew of. And so I never felt like architecture wasn't for me or that it was inaccessible to me. And so there are three kind of main touch points or major points in my life, 15, 19, and 34. And when I was 15, my mother and I moved to Miami, Florida, and I started the second half of my high school career at Design and Architecture Senior High School, which is in the design district in Miami. And then I had my first job in architecture when I was 19. Technically, it was a little bit earlier because, I was interning with someone at 16, and someone, my mentor, you'll see later. But really want to stress the point that it wasn't until I was 34 until I really started to become the designer I wanted to be when I first signed on for this whole thing. So things take time, and it's okay. Like all 30 on the 30 list and all that, like things take time. Your life is your life, and it happens when it happens. So I wanted to show you this picture. That's me in the corner, in the top left corner. And I wanted to show this picture not to, embarrass my classmates. And this is from Design and Architecture Senior High, but not to embarrass my classmates, but just to show, if you look at the faces, this was my benchmark, not my benchmark, this was my baseline. These are the faces that were all designed. Everyone is a designer. And so this is what I thought designers looked like. And when I went to university, I got my Bachelor of Architecture at Florida A&M University, which is a historically Black college in Tallahassee, Florida. And so again, just stressing in that, again, my peers were a wonderful multicultural group, and that was my baseline for what designers look like. I didn't realize I was a quote unquote minority in the design profession until much, much later, until like late into my 20s. When I moved to Boston, that's when I kind of said, okay. But going to an HBCU, the benefits were tenfold. Not only having classmates and peers like that, and I still have no idea why the guy on the ground, his name is Tom. I don't know why we were pointing at him, but whatever, this was on a class trip. But just having a multicultural peer group, but then also seeing myself everywhere and the culture of being at an HBCU and the parties and the, just all of that, it was really wonderful. wouldn't trade it for anything else. So after I graduated in 2000, and I went to, and then I was working for about 10 years. And then, so that was around 2010 when I started transitioning into my own practice. I started my practice officially in 2011. And in 2015, I went to Parsons School. I was commuting to Parsons School of Design. I was still living here in Boston and commuting there down in New York every week. And Parsons, outside of just being able to go to this gorgeous building on 14th Street and Fifth Avenue every week, but New York City was just a laboratory. And, you know, there was just, again, going to all of the museums, events at Lincoln Center. I was up in Harlem all the time. You know, I was, and the creativity at Parsons was just bouncing off the walls. Like, you walked in and you just felt that energy. And so for me, I was able to, you know, start studying ceramics and trying to investigate photography and all of that. And it was just a magical place. And then when I, enrolled at Harvard at 2019, strangely, what comes to mind to me, you know, when we're talking about the GSD is generosity. There have been so many people there who have just been so incredibly warm and kind and offering resources and, you know, which is kind of the opposite of what people like to think of when they think of the GSD or Harvard. But, you know, obviously there are the incredible access to resources like that work of art is an original Elizabeth Catlett. I've never been that close to one where it's not, you know, surrounded in glass. And so, you know, having opportunities like that, but then also being surrounded by, like I said, my doctoral advisor is just wonderful. So many people that have, you know, just been so open with resources and everything else. It's just been a wonderful experience. Yeah. So mentors, we all have them. Well, hopefully so. If you don't have one, you should get one. So these are, now I have mentor, you know, the mentoring never stops. And I have plenty of mentors here in Boston. Ralph Jackson, who used to, you know, teach here. He still teaches? Oh, Ralph. You know, here at the BAC, Carol Wedge, Peter Kuttner, so many mentors, but these are my two primary ones. And so Mr. Hall over in the left, he is the gentleman who taught at Design and Architecture Senior High. And he also had his design studio in the design district. And I would intern with him, you know, when I was 16. And he was just so, the first day I showed up to his office because I had met him before and we had talked and everything because we had a mutual friend. And he, you know, sat me down and he said, you know, architecture is so little of this. And he pointed to a drafting table, which is what we were using at the time. Again, that was the 90s. But, you know, he pointed and said, you know, architecture is so little of this, meaning like the actual creative portion and everything else. And he showed me all of these specifications and everything else. And what he was talking about is to get an understanding of the business side and the managerial side of architecture, and not to be so mired in just the creativity, but really have a business mind. And another thing that he did, his demeanor, you know, he was very like dignified and regal. He had this regality to him, and it just, you know, I looked at him and I said, that's the kind of architect that I want to be. That's how I want to move through the world. And he still is that way. Every time I see him, I'm like, hi, Mr. Hall, how are you doing? Like I turned into a little girl. So he's just been an excellent mentor. And then Alan Ambrose, had an architecture firm, a very small architecture firm in Hartford, Connecticut. And I was working with him, you know, in my early 20s, about 20 to 22. And, you know, what I think of him, I just think of, again, generosity. I would come into the office and he would ask me to like read architectural record or whatever, or look at, like, play around in the product library. And what he was doing, he was just paying me to learn. Like, this was all on company time. And he's just like, you know, here, I don't have time to read this magazine, you read it, you know? And so having someone who is that invested in your learning, in your education. And he was also one of the first people to say, we need to get you registered. Now that happened many years later, but still him saying we need to get you registered was really, you know, just important for me. And then also on Friday afternoons, it was just me and one other person and him. We go to like Friday lunches, fancy restaurants, go to museums, jazz in the park, It was fantastic. Sometimes you meet a person who is not in your field, but is a mentor nonetheless. So I met Graciela, this was in 2014. I met her at the Heinz Convention Tea Station, and I had just returned to Boston. I had to leave Boston in 2013 because it wasn't by far one of the worst years of my life. Like, I didn't think I was going to be able to make it through. I had to leave the city because I couldn't afford to live here anymore, blah, blah, blah. And still a lot of things happened that I can't talk about. But I came back to the city. I was living on a college campus, being like a house mother. And I met her at the Heinz Convention tea. We just sat on the bench. And, I looked at her and she looked at me. And we're like, oh my God, you are fabulous. I mean, look at your hat, look at your jewelry. Oh my God, you are so cute. Oh, I kind of went through that whole thing. And so during our whole conversation, at the end of it, she said, I am a member of the MFA. Do you want to come with me one day and have tea and look at art? And I said, yes, yes, I do. Please, yes. And so we wind up going and we're wandering through the galleries and she just bring all of this stuff into me in her life. And, she was like legal counsel for Honduras, for the Honduras embassy. And, she was doing the Sacramento recorder and all of that stuff. And I was just looking at how magnificent she was and all of this just kindness that she was pouring into me. And I just started crying and all of that because all of the stuff that happened the year before. And so finally she said, God is the ultimate creator. And in order to honor God, we must continue to create too. And I was just like, I know that wasn't just a random thing. Like, that message was being sent to me. And I'm like, message received. She was just so wonderful. And so, yeah, that I only met her that one time. Unfortunately, we lost touch, but I know that she was definitely sent to me. And your mentors do not have to be older than you. They can be younger than you. So these wonderful ladies are most definitely younger than I am. This is the first year when I came to the GSD. And these are all, two of them are doctors now, and two of us are still finishing our doctoral degree. But you can recognize one of them. So at the end, that is Dr. Ashley Tenenbaum. She is the director of Collaborative practice here at the BAC. She's also my DDES guardian angel. And so, these wonderful ladies, kind of when I came to the GSD, they kind of took me under their wing, and showed me the ropes of the doctoral program and everything else. And so I am like forever in their debt. And so I guess you may ask, so I told you I'm gonna have to speed through all of this. Why architecture? And basically it's because of the thinking, the macro to micro thinking, where you have to look at like the large big picture down to the tiny details. And those skills also translate to things like directing. So let me get to the work. Let's talk about the work. 2011, I had a film in me. I never did a film before, but I had a film in me. And so a friend of mine, Nathan, was investigating photography at the time, and he was just getting really, really good. And so I wanted to create a film, and I just asked him, I'm like, you want to be my cinematographer? And he's like, yeah, sure, let's do it. And so I wanted to investigate the buildings in Boston, a lot of the architecture in Boston, specifically people's relationship to Boston. And there were a lot of things where people were talking about City Hall. So it's like sometimes an antagonistic relationship. This is the MIT Chapel on Massachusetts Avenue. I don't know if you all can really see, a little dark. And then this particular building is the John D. O'Brien Center on Northeastern's campus. And so I was also during that time looking at architecture through a cultural lens and trying to understand if there was like specifically an African-American aesthetic in architecture here in Boston, anywhere. And the only building I could think of was this John D. O'Brien Center on Northeastern's campus. So actually, I'm going to try and show a video. I got 3 architects from around the city, one being David Lee of the firm Stellan Lee, who designed this building, to just kind of talk about architecture and culture. And so let's see.
One of the things that I really like about jazz in particular is that it's a flexible vehicle that allows any ethnic group to have an expression there. It's a universal kind of music, and whether you're from a Caribbean country or an Eastern European country or the Delta in the South, you can bring your culture to play within the vehicle of jazz. I think that some architecture has that ability as well. And what takes it from being just generic, any size fits everybody, to being very special is when one can overlay a certain cultural attitude about it.
Okay. There we go. Okay. So the second, so that was done in 2011. And then in 2019, I did another film called Room. And that was basically in direct reaction to not being able to get tickets to the Sundance Film Festival. And so long story short, I went to Sundance in 2018, and then from my experience there, couldn't get tickets when I wanted to get tickets to certain movies. So I became a member of the Sundance Institute. 2019, still couldn't get tickets to anything. And so one of the benefits of getting a Sundance membership is you got a discount if you wanted to submit a film. And so I'm like, forget it then, I'm making a film. So I wound up spending thousands of dollars because I was angry that I couldn't get tickets at Sundance. But this is kind of the beginnings of the film. And so, can you hear me? Oops, here it is. Sorry, thank you, sorry. But yeah, these are from my sketchbook, the beginnings of the film. And so I had stayed at this hotel, it's called the Dean Hotel in Providence, Rhode Island. And I thought that would be an excellent backdrop to, kind of what I wanted to talk about. And so the main premise of the film was, what would happen if, and I first said you, and I said, no, take yourself out of it. What happens if a frustrated architect is trapped in a hotel room for the weekend and then comes out changed on the other side? What would happen? And so I was kind of going through that and trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I had to, you can see on the right-hand side, I needed to figure out how to write a screenplay and all of that. And so I started to investigate kind of like ethics in architecture. And so I was thinking about prison design and what kind of projects do I feel are ethically questionable? And so I posted this question on Facebook. I was like, all right, so my architect friends, prisons, where do you stand on them? Would you design one or wouldn't you? And I didn't want any kind of judgment to that, but I just wanted to hear what everybody had to say. And I literally said, this question is not raised because of my practice. But you cannot imagine how many people direct message me and were like, oh, Aisha, you're gonna design a prison? I can't believe you, blah, 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 because people don't read. And so I was like, okay, whatever. But I got 33 comments and a lot of direct messages for people who weren't comfortable in talking, saying their opinions public. But it ranged from people who were fine with it to people who were not, and then people who were just like, a project is a project. So but I found out like, okay, the project has legs, and so I'm going to go through it because of the visceral reactions. And so so the premise of the movie is that a creative couple, an architect and an artist, go to this hotel for the architect's birthday weekend. And the architect, her office has been commissioned to design a prison. He, the artist, has a family member who is incarcerated. And so obviously that's a point of contention. There's a whole lot of things that go on with the movie, but it's basically about ethics, love, intimacy, all of that. And they kind of manage their relationship through that. The benefit, thankfully, the hotel said yes, that I could film there. And so the benefit of that hotel, and I had stayed there, like I said, in 2018, is that the architecture and a lot of the details in the hotel helped me tell the story. And one of the things that I really loved is that they had vision panels in the bathrooms, in the showers. And a lot of the things that we're talking about in the movie are about being visible, transparency, vulnerability, things like that. So here is where some of the architectural training came in. when I had a meeting with my production team in order to compose a shot list, which is basically like talking about what lenses you're going to use for each particular shot, the camera angles, like all of that, you need to kind of be able to list that out. But with my architectural training, well, because only one of them was able to visit the site with me, the others weren't, I was able to kind of draw like what the first shot is going to be. So you see on the, here we go. But you can see the little dots represent like Mitchell and Zaina, who are the characters in the movie and the valet, and see how like the camera is supposed to approach them. And you'll see this image a little bit later play out. But then also talking about like how the camera is going to move through the lobby, which shots are where. And then if you probably can't see it, but also showing like, the duplex outlet, because the lighting designer, my gaffer needed to know where he could plug in lights. And so, that's where the architectural training came in and translated. So created, landed at the hotel, started filming. These are my actors. These are married couple, thankfully, on the left-hand side. It's Brandon G. Green and Elle Borders, and they are fantastic. I love them very much. And so one thing I didn't have to do is manage the intimacy part, because it was always baked into their relationship. And then my other actors are Jason Gervasio and Ricky Eric, who played hotel staff. I'm going to speed through these. These are like, oh, that's the shot that I was talking about when I said in the beginning and having to show the plans of like how the camera is going to move from the exterior of the hotel. These are a little behind the scenes. This book, part of the contention in the movie is that she receives this book as a gift, as a birthday present. It's The Crisis of the African American Architect by Melvin Mitchell. And Mr. Mitchell was very kind to let me, to let me use the book in the film. And so thanks, Mr. Mitchell, very much. I encourage everybody to see it, to buy it. This is, again, married couple, like the intimacy had to be palpable. So I'm really thankful that they signed on to do this movie there. Shakespeare trained actors, so very proud. Again, more behind the scenes. We had a lot of fun on the movie, a lot of laughs. Film sets are hard. It's a lot of long hours and a lot of stress. And we had to make sure that, the hotel was still in operation. So we had to make sure that it was quiet and all of that. There was also a convention happening that weekend. So it was challenging. My advice, if you're gonna embark on filming, feed your people. Feed your people, treat them with love. Actors have to go through an incredible, like we had 2 days, less than 2 days to shoot. I had them crying and like going through all of this stuff. So in order to tell them, make sure they knew that I respected all of the stuff that they had to put their body through, you feed your people, you feed your crew. Even Spike Lee said it on a masterclass. He's like, feed your people, you need to feed. And it's true. If you have $100 to spend on your film, you better spend 20 of that feeding your people, like some decent food. Okay. Yes, this is me doing my directorial thing, and I like this photo. But you can also see there was, in addition to all of that stuff, there was a construction crew, and they were building a convention center in the background. So we had to do a construction noise. Cast and crew, or partial cast and crew photo. Quali, the film is now on Quali TV, which I'm really happy. It's an African-American global streaming service. And one of the things that really, like, it had a decent film festival run, but it was also shown at the Roxbury Film Festival here in Boston. And when I first came to Boston in 2005, I felt very isolated. But the one thing that kept me connected to the city and the community here was going to the film festival. And so to have my film there in 2020 was very much like a full circle moment to a festival that meant so much to me. Pivoting a little bit, because I know I'm running out of time. While I was teaching, and I was teaching, what I was also finding out is that a lot of students wanted to go into design profession, but not only did they not have any kind of design background or design teaching in high school, but they had no art program, period. And so I'm like, one way I can show appreciation for all of the things that I got when I was younger is to, have a traveling program and go all around New England teaching students what they need to know in order to get into design. And so I was lucky to get sponsorships from the BSA Foundation, Triple Bullfinch, the Slam Collaborative, the Boston chapter of the National Organization of Minority Architects, ICON, all that. So the program is called Future Prep 101, how to prepare teens for design careers. We looked at product design, interiors, architecture, graphics, all this kind of stuff, because let's face it, not everybody is supposed to be an architect, you know? And I know a lot of people who started out in architecture and pivoted, like, let's save you some time. What are you really supposed to do? So this was the first one in Hartford, in Boston. Clearly the student really loved sneakers, so I'm glad he was there. In Springfield, Mass, in Boston. Sometimes we only had 2 kids, and that's fine. It's more important, you know, if the whole thing, if one kid goes into design, then I've done my job. So Worcester, New Haven, Boston again. And one thing, I think this quote came after I wrote the book, but still, for the sake of storytelling, I'll keep it together. So a friend of mine came from a meeting and she was saying that someone else in said meeting said the path of inclusivity in design begins long before the application process to design school. I'm like, yeah, that makes sense, you know, because again, I knew about design when I was, you know, when I was really, really young. And so Miles, my sweet little Miles. And so back in 2014, I saw this book on my friend's desk called Young Frank Architect. And it's a wonderful book. And just to sum it up in 2 seconds, is about this young little boy named Frank who lives with his grandfather named Frank, and they are both architects. And one day Frank decides young Frank decides he's frustrated, doesn't want to be an architect anymore, like we all do. And so his grandfather takes him to the Museum of Modern Art, and he, you know, he gets to see, you know, works from Frank Gehry and Frank Lloyd Wright and all of that. And I'm going, this is a wonderful book. Again, I think you all should buy it. But then I'm thinking, where is that for a little child of color? Like, I don't see any that being reflected anywhere. And so I was like, all right, well, I guess I got to make one. And so in when I was at Parsons, actually, I wrote a different book about a little child of color in design. But then it was taking too long to illustrate and blah, blah, blah. And I just kind of wanted to knock out something quickly. And so I published Miles, Who Made My Stuff? Miles Learns About Design in 2018. And so, you know, Miles, with his fabulous architect mother, goes through the city after school and finds out that design touches every portion of life, you know, everything that he touches. And so, you know, he'll ask questions like, Mommy, who made this park? Oh, a landscape architect. Who made that big sign? Oh, well, that's actually called a billboard. And, you know, a graphic designer did that. And that's what Daddy does all day, you know, and, you know, who made that car? Oh, well, an automotive designer. And they have to know about this and they have to do that and blah, blah, blah. Who made our house? You gotta be kidding me. Mommy did. You know, Mommy's an architect, blah, 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 blah. Who made these chairs, etc. And so one of the things that I really, really loved as a reaction is, like I said, just all of the kids that I was able to read the book to, and the little girl in pigtails, she's probably like 10 now, but her name is Ruby. And look, okay, so I had a book signing at the BSA. She and her, you know, you could see her, she was there. And she decided at the end of it, she's like, I want to write in your book too. And I said, oh, well, all right, cool. You know, whatever. I can use this book to just be, you know, be the one that I read with. And she wrote that. It's just the sweetest, incredibly sweetest thing. It's just, my heart melted. You see her little pigtails? And look, she got my earrings. I love that. And she got my earrings. But one of the biggest rewards is seeing images like that when people show me, because there's a dearth of books for little African-American boys. And so to see images like that where you can directly see themselves, oh, it's very wonderful. And the biggest benefit, or the biggest surprise of my entire career, is that in January, they had the vote. And I find out that Who Made My Stuff? Miles Learns About Design is now part of the collection at the National Museum of African American History and Culture. And so my book is in the Smithsonian. My first book is in the Smithsonian. Okay, getting to the research. How much time do we have? We can do this. Okay. So research. All right, so my dissertation is titled The Artist Developer, and it's an investigation of impact on with art-centered development in neighborhoods of color. And these specific artists, I'm looking at 3 famous African-American artists who have created these arts development projects, whether it be housing or art spaces in the neighborhoods. And so the one on the right is extreme right is Rick Lowe of Project Row Houses in Houston, Texas. The middle kind of covered, I'm sorry, is Mark Bradford of Art and Practice in Los Angeles, and Theaster Gates of the Rebuild Foundation in Chicago. And I just kind of want to give credit, and I have to say this, is that all of this picture, and then there are other pictures of the artists individually that are incredibly beautiful, and they were done by a famous photographer named Stefan Ruiz. And thankfully, Stefan let me gave me the permission to use his images for my research. And so thank you, Stefan. So Project Row Houses started in 1993, and it wasn't just Rick, but he was kind of the more forward-facing member of the crew, and he was also more involved in like the organizational aspects of it. But it started Project Row Houses started in 1993, and it's kind of considered almost like the grand dame of arts and community building projects, specifically, and especially I'll say for African Americans. And it's not just, me or a few people that think that, but the New York Times rated it one of the 25 most influential works of American protest art since World War II, sorry, God forbid, World War III. Yeah, I'm trying to rush through them, so that's why I'm stumbling over my words. There's the Magnificent Seven, they call them, and those are the people who started Project Row Houses. So it's Rick Lowe, James Bettison, Burt Long, Jesse Locke, Floyd Newsom, Burt Samples, George Smith. And these are the gentlemen who started Project Row Houses. Mr. Bettison, unfortunately, I think he passed away in 1997. But what they did is they bought a dilapidated block of row houses, or block and a half, anyway, shall I say, of row houses, which was about, I think, like 22 row houses that, that the style is vernacular for Houston, Texas. And they were able to purchase these 22 row houses from a gentleman who, from what Mr. Locke said, hearing a recent interview, the gentleman was in Singapore and wasn't interested in coming back to the US. So they purchased these 22 houses for $32,000. And with community help, and then also with some foundations, you'll see like the Ford Foundation and others, because they have placards. You'll see another image with the placards. They were able to kind of fix up these houses. And so part of the ethos, or the foundation of Project Row Houses is threefold. And so they deal with art and artists. So they have each house, 7 of the houses, they use there's 2 what they call rounds, exhibition periods every year. And so they have, each artist kind of takes over, a community artist takes over a house and does an installation. So they have the exhibitions, but then they also do a lot of artist mentoring, artist business, incubation, legal things, like everything to create artists as a sustaining creative practice. But then they also have housing. They've worked with architecture schools like Rice University. So Rice was called the section was called the Rice Construct. No, that's what it's called now. It was the Rice Building Workshop, but now it's called Rice Construct. But working with the architecture school and students to build housing and design housing. They also did business incubation. And so this business on the right is called Crumville. It's a Black-owned, woman-owned business that has delicious cupcakes, I might add. And so they do a lot of, so it's arts, let me remember, arts, community development, and neighborhood development and community enrichment. Those are the three pillars. So they do a lot of social services as well, dealing with a lot of the socioeconomic factors for members of the Northern Third Ward. And again, I'm speeding through this. And so I encourage you all to look at Project Row Houses, and I've given you some stuff at the end, so you'll be able to find them. And then also they started with the Young Mothers residential program, a way to support young single mothers who had children and one, clearly because that's what a mother has, children, but to be able to go back to school or to start businesses or things like that. And then they are in the process, this is kind of an old picture, but they are in the process of restoring the El Dorado Ballroom, which is a historic venue in the Third Ward. And I think they're going to have a grand opening sometime either this month or next month. Okay, the Astor Gates and the Rebuild Foundation in Chicago. And so one of their mottos is Black people matter, Black spaces matter, Black objects matter. And so it was started in 2008 with just one house. It was the Listening and the Archive House. But everyone probably knows when they think about Rebuild, they think about this particular project, which is the Stony Island Arts Bank. And Theaster was able to buy this building. It was an old dilapidated bank. He was able to buy the building for $1 from the city of Chicago and be able to kind of fix it up. So these were the beginning projects of Rebuild, the Archive House and the Black Cinema House. I don't think they're using these projects anymore. They all like the archives, from that house, and then they do all like cinema and things, I think, at the Stony Islands Arts Bank. They also have the Dorchester Art and Housing Collaborative. So they have artist housing and community space. And I believe this project actually won an AIA award. I can't remember what year, but that project in particular won an AIA award. There's the Johnson Publishing Company archives. And if anyone knows about Johnson Publishing, if you are African-American, they distributed Ebony and Jet magazine, which if you are African-American, you had that on your table, your coffee table all the time. They also have the Arts Block, and they started Kenwood Gardens, so they have a lot of different projects around the Grand Crossing area in Chicago. And they are developing this building. It's going to be an arts business incubator called St. Lawrence. And, it's under construction right now. But they have gained a lot of funding from the MacArthur Foundation. And also what was really cool is Harry Styles. He had a concert in Chicago and gave a lot of the proceeds, a huge donation to this. Apparently Harry and Theaster are like friends or something. And so, gave proceeds from that concert to the development of the space. Last project is Art and Practice with Mark Bradford. And Art and Practice is located in a wonderfully rich neighborhood of Leimert Park in Los Angeles. It's primarily African-American, and it's a very arts-centered community. And so that project was started in 2013, and it was Mark Bradford, Eileen Harris Norton, and Alan DeCastro started this. And so basically there's a gallery space, and then there's a separate program space. And then, Art and Practice also holds a lot of, they're a large property owner in the area. And there is a set of businesses that are across the street from where I'm showing you where the program space is, where Black merchants have banded together and able to purchase their spaces as well, because there's a lot of gentrification that's happening, more so residential gentrification that's happening in Leimert Park, but also trying to mitigate some gentrification there. And so the business owners were able to purchase their block, purchase the building that they're in. And so that area now is 100% Black owned. I feel like I'm skipping over a whole bunch of stuff, and I probably have. I need to show another video, but it's only 2 minutes, it's brief. So I'm going to give you a very quick tour I threw a little Easter egg in there. I don't know if anybody used to watch the show Insecure with Issa Rae. Yeah, well, the building, we got y'all that she, her first job or whatever, that's in Lamar Park, and that was one of the buildings at the end that I showed. Okay. So, yeah, I totally missed showing you a very small clip of room, but maybe we can do that afterwards if possible. But I hope with just kind of showing you a brief snippet, because there were so many other things that I wanted to show, and I had to cut this down significantly. And still don't feel like I've really explained everything enough. But I hope I'm able to show you guys that these artists did it so much better than me, but how you can incorporate arts and love and activism as your practice. Being able to ground your work in community means different things to different people. And so through these exemplary examples, I hope to be able to kind of give you some inspiration, because they definitely inspired me, especially as I'm thinking about arts development. And then the last thing I just wanted to point out is that I am 20 years, more than 20 years in architecture and design, and I still don't feel like I know what I'm doing. Like I still, every project feels like the first time. Every presentation feels like the first time. And so if you ever get to a point where you feel like everything's fine and you're coasting, then probably something, you're not pushing yourself far enough. But I still don't, feel like I know anything at all. So this is the reference list. I've mentioned quite a few things during this presentation. Number one, the book, but these are some, if you want to follow, the National Museum African American African American History and Culture, Quelly TV, Room Film Short, Stephen Ruiz photo, he is fantastic. And then the 3 projects, Project Row Houses and the Rebuilt Foundation in Art and Practice. And then lastly, last slide, everybody just spread love. Be kind to each other, please. Architecture and design is hard enough. Like, let's not be delusional. It's not a walk in the park, but let's be kind to each other. Let's be loving to each other. And that can start from, someone buying you cookies when you've had a really, really bad day, or somebody coming to see you that you've known for a long time when you're giving a lecture, or somebody being kind enough to ask you to do a lecture when you really don't think you have anything to talk about, or you all showing up when I didn't think anybody would come, to this workshop. So thank you so much, BAC. Thank you for your
Okay, I think I'm borrowing this. Questions from the audience to start, and then I'll go on to the chat. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. Hi. My name is Tracy, and I was
Speak up for this room. I was
oh
just going to Zoom.
okay. My name is Tracy. I was really interested in how you were inspired to write the book for the kids, because there was maybe lack of representation from the previous book that was also good. Have you ever, I was just curious, have you ever went to the Washington to see your book there?
They just had the vote approving it January 11th or something like that. So it's probably not even on here. Like, it's probably not even listed on. I'm listed on the Smithsonian twice for a different project that I did that I didn't even know about. So yeah, I'm pretty amped about that. But what I'm saying is I don't think the book is even listed yet. Like,
Okay.
so eventually, yeah, I'll probably go down and see it, but I don't even think it's there yet.
Okay.
Thank you. Oh, yes,
Yes.
please. Anyone else getting ready?
So when I admire how many things you develop and how many things you seek out. But when I find that when one tries to reach for those things, it's very common to find barriers in your path. Do you have a way you deal with those barriers? Do you just go head on towards it, or do you have try to be more gentle with overcoming those things? How do you manage it?
Question. The biggest barrier is always myself, because like I said, I always feel like I don't know anything. And so to be able to start something, And I also work in, I won't say isolation, but I think one way to overcome that is just to do it, because again, like there's so many other architects and, somebody had to do it. And if they can do it, then you can. And a friend of mine also said, that a lot of people are faking it to make it. And so I just feel that, just start. It doesn't have to be perfect. Like my first movie that I did, I still cringe at like the sound quality and some of the images. But it is what it is. You got to start somewhere. And so in order to get good, you need to start. And so a lot of the times I have to kind of get over my own self-doubt, my own fear, my own if you put something out into the world, there's this incredible vulnerability that you have to be comfortable with. In many ways I'm comfortable with it, and in many ways I'm not. But in order to do the kind of work that I love to do, I just say I just have to do it, and I'll just kind of try and work through it. It helps to have really good best friends who can fight that as well.
Thank you.
Is that a question, Beth? Richard. Oh, yes.
This has been so inspiring. I really enjoyed it and I got a lot out of it. But it occurs to me that part of your success and your solutions are because you see problems to solve where others might not look. You've observed a few things and moved forward on things where you've declared a design project and then you've done it. Like the book is in particular, let's say. But our chance is to have you in spring 2024. I know that. So it's sort of like lecturer's choice here. What's next? And you could talk about like what we might talk about in spring 2024.
Really, it's talking about. So my doctoral work started with and kind of evolved the relationship of artists in cities, and the fact that there's always. Oops, thank you. Oh. Yeah, someone's gonna introduce. Oh, okay, sorry. But the relationship of artists in cities, and talking about how either the tropes that artists are either victims of gentrification, like they go into an area, make it all cool, and then they get evicted or they have to leave, or that the artists are kind of like harbingers of gentrification. And so I am interested in exploring artists in their relationship to the city, how they change the city, and then how can artists and architects, how we work together, and designers and all of that. So it's really about artists and urban and neighborhood change. Yeah.
That is true. All right. We're gonna have one final question after that.
Oh, of course.
You gotta choose one.
You can always, email me or
So if you mentioned, I mean, I'm gonna choose one of the two, and it's gonna be, you talk about seeing yourself in the people you interact to in Florida. I'm from Florida, so I relate with you coming to Boston. So I wanted to hear your advice on how do we navigate the spaces we have as architecture students, where our body does not become the translator of diversity, but rather we just, be able to be the architect or the architect's student rather than our background.
Glad you chose that one.
question. Wow. And I think I may have to think on that a little bit, except for one simple thing is that you just have the right to take up space. However you are and however you present yourself in the world. Like, I'm thankful that you're here. I'm thankful that you're here, not here in this room, but here practicing architecture or design or whatever you're trying to do, because we need your perspective. And so I think looking at it through that lens, not that I'm not wanted or that diversity is not shown, but that your mere presence and being here is helping to advance that cause, and that we need all of these different perspectives, so that it's not architecture is not stagnant and is not totally centered on a Western, a Western ideal. But that different ideas, different, different perspectives, can be brought into the field and nurtured. And also, just like you're here, there's probably some young kid who will be looking up to you like, oh, they did it, so can I. And that's just one step, just being here. Your presence is powerful enough. Keep going. Keep going. And get a mentor. Get a mentor. That helps too. And your mentor, as you see, your mentor doesn't have to look like you. They don't necessarily have to look like you, but just continue to be. If this is what you want, these are the spaces you want to be in, you deserve to be here. I think that's the only advice I can give. I need to think on that a little bit more to give you like a really good one. Yeah. Thank you so much. Thank you.